Welcome to the deep dive.
Good to be here.
Today, we're plunging into some really fascinating ideas. Quite out there, some might say.
Definitely. We're drawing from the living souls like the ELohim video series by Cliff High.
Right. We've spent some serious time with the YouTube transcripts, really trying to pick apart what they call an ontological model.
Yeah, a model of reality and consciousness itself.
Think of this as, well, your guide to grasping some potentially pretty groundbreaking perspectives.
It really does offer a fresh lens, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Makes you question some fundamental assumptions we hold.
Absolutely. So our mission today, we want to extract the core insights from this model.
Especially that key distinction they make.
Yes, between what's being called embodiment mind and then this awareness of oneself as a living soul.
We want to get a clear handle on what these are, what they're all about.
And the implications, too, not just for understanding ourselves, but maybe for considering encounters with other life
It
forms.
connects outwards for sure.
Okay, so the central idea here, it starts with living souls.
Right. Imagine these as like timeless, eternal containers for consciousness.
And within these containers, you have what's called local consciousness, LC.
Exactly. The LC is the part of us that actually lives a life, has the experiences, all within that soul container.
And it's described in a pretty specific way, this relationship.
It is. The local consciousness is self-aware. It lives, it records every single detail.
But the soul itself isn't.
Not self-conscious in the same way, no. Its job is more about holding, archiving those experiences.
Okay, and all this happens within the Materium,
Yes, the Materium. Think of it as the fundamental energy fabric of reality.
created by a supreme consciousness.
That's the idea. And this fabric, it's not still. It's constantly in motion.
And not just slow motion, we're talking incredibly rapid fluctuations.
Something like 22 trillion times per second, according to the source. It's mind-bogglingly fast.
Wow. So reality at its base level isn't solid or fixed.
No, it's incredibly dynamic, like a constantly shimmering energy field.
And these fluctuations, they're not just random noise, they have a purpose.
Apparently so, yes. They serve a purpose within this whole model.
Okay, so within this constantly shifting Materium, the mind operates. Human mind, maybe alien mind.
Right, and it operates in one of two main ways.
Either totally immersed as embodiment mind.
Or with that broader perspective as a living soul.
Let's dig into embodiment mind first. What's that like?
So embodiment mind. It's described as the state where your consciousness is just completely caught up
Caught up in what?
in the illusions of this Materium. If you're an embodiment mind, you truly believe you are just your physical body.
Just flesh and bones, that's it.
That's the belief, yes.
It's like being so lost in a movie you forget you're in the cinema.
Exactly. You're totally convinced by the experience, you lose the bigger picture.
The source material even calls it a delusional foundation.
Which is strong language. It suggests that from this state, your perception is basically limited.
Limited to your physical form.
Yeah, making it really hard to grasp anything beyond that immediate physical reality.
So your whole understanding is just based on senses, what the brain processes.
Pretty much. If that's all you know, that's the boundary of your reality.
Okay, but there's an alternative. Living soul awareness. What's the shift there?
With living soul awareness, the understanding changes. You see yourself as a living soul.
Having an experience.
Right. Having a temporary experience within the Materium, using a physical body for that experience.
So it's a recognition of something more expansive, eternal.
Exactly. That deeper, eternal part of yourself.
And this awareness, it brings a sense of connection.
Yes, very much so. An understanding that we all come from a common origin.
The supreme consciousness.
Right. That source for all beings within this Materium.
And knowing that changes how you act.
Fundamentally,
Mm.
your actions, your sense of responsibility, they're all informed by that bigger picture, that interconnectedness.
Okay, so we have these two ways of being. But why is the Materium itself so shifty, fluctuating?
Good question. Why make it hard to spot consistent patterns?
Yeah. What's the point of all that uncertainty?
Well, what's really interesting here is the idea that it's not an accident. It's designed that way.
Designed by the supreme consciousness.
Yes. Intentionally creating these ongoing fluctuations makes it hard to lock down patterns.
And that fosters the division between the two mindsets.
That seems to be the idea. It's like a built-in mechanism allowing for these different levels of perception.
Wow. So the fabric of reality itself supports these two views. And there's a motivation, something about novelty.
Exactly. This supreme consciousness is described as having a drive for novelty, for newness.
How does that actually manifest in the Materium?
Well, it's described as having physical expressions, things like subtle shifts in hormonal balances.
Hormones?
Yeah. Resolving these imbalances can lead to different outcomes, introducing unpredictability. New things can emerge.
And this uncertainty, this unpredictability, it affects embodiment-minded folks more.
That's the suggestion, because their focus is so tight on the physical, the predictable.
Right, they don't have that bigger living soul framework for context.
Exactly, which leads to how they interpret things like evolution.
Ah, okay. How does that fit in?
Well, the source proposes that humans stuck in embodiment mind tend to misunderstand
Misunderstand what?
these underlying design patterns,
Yeah.
the fluctuations, the changes. They see it as just random evolution.
They miss the intentionality behind it.
Miss the bigger picture of the system, yes.
Okay. Now, what about the mind itself, the LC's mind? Where does that come from? Is it influenced?
The mind is, well, largely created by the local consciousness as it lives its life.
But not entirely on its own.
No, physical things can influence it, like those hormonal shifts we mentioned.
And energy.
Yes, energy within the Materium itself can impact the mind, too.
Which I guess opens the door to the idea of mind control.
It does. The transcripts touch on a whole spectrum, from, meditation.
To maybe more nefarious methods.
Exactly. Manipulative techniques. It's a factor to consider, how minds might be influenced.
So these two ways of being, embodiment mind, living soul awareness, where do humans mostly sit, according to this model?
The suggestion is pretty stark, actually. Embodiment mind might be dominant,
How dominant?
maybe as high as 98% of humans,
98%. Wow.
which immediately makes you wonder, right? What about other species? Aliens.
Could they have a similar ratio?
It's a definite possibility raised by the material.
And if that's the case, what happens if we meet aliens who are also mostly embodiment-minded? What are the challenges?
Well, this is where it gets really complex. If they're mostly embodiment mind,
Yeah.
they might not even understand their own deeper nature, their own ontology.
Just like many humans, potentially, caught in the physical illusion.
Exactly. And that lack of self-awareness, it opens the door to potential problems.
Like deception, misunderstandings.
For sure. If an embodiment-minded alien species just sees itself as physical beings competing for resources.
They might act purely out of self-interest, like survival mode.
Precisely. Concepts like interconnectedness, karma, long-term consequences.
Yeah.
They might not even register.
Which has huge implications for how we might react. Our governments, military.
Who would likely be responding from their own embodiment mind perspective, according to the source. A potential clash of limited viewpoints.
So what's the suggested strategy then for humans who are more aware, more living soul-oriented?
The main idea put forward is education, basically.
Educating who?
Trying to introduce this concept, the limitations of embodiment mind, to people in power. Government, military.
The argument being?
That if we don't even grasp our own nature, how can we possibly judge the nature of the intentions of alien beings?
It's like trying to understand quantum physics with only basic arithmetic. You'll get it wrong.
You're likely to misinterpret, yeah. The sources also talk about how embodiment-minded humans just perceive reality day to day.
How so?
They tend to just trust their senses, trust this shared physical reality. They aren't usually analyzing things from an eternal soul perspective.
They see the stars, the planets.
But maybe not the underlying materium, its dynamics.
And relying only on physical senses makes them vulnerable.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
Vulnerable to misinterpreting alien actions, maybe projecting their own assumptions.
It's easy to project human motivations onto something completely different.
Absolutely. And the sources take this even further with a pretty radical idea about human religion.
Okay, I remember this bit. This is where it gets wild.
The idea is that our religions, they're likely echoes.
Echoes of what?
Past encounters with alien species.
Seriously. How?
Either misunderstood encounters, reinterpreted by embodiment-minded humans over time, or, and this is presented as more probable, deliberately created by embodiment-minded aliens.
Created religions. For what purpose?
Exploitation, manipulation, control. Think about it. Gods with amazing powers, advanced tech. Wow. That flips the script entirely. So, if aliens do show up now, how would our current society likely react?
Based on that embodiment mind dominance. Probably a military response first.
Detection, tracking.
Trying to intercept, maybe even shoot things down.
Yeah.
VIPs, UFOs.
Right. The ability to really discern the nature or intent of who's arriving. It's severely limited by that physical threat-only perspective.
And even the scale of arrival could be misread, like a huge fleet.
A huge fleet might just scream invasion to an embodiment-minded military.
Even though?
Even though, paradoxically, the source suggests a massive fleet might actually indicate the aliens are also largely embodiment-minded, operating from scarcity, dominance.
That's counterintuitive. Okay, what about our assumptions about old civilizations? We tend to think older means wiser, more advanced.
Yeah, like a straight line of progress. More time equals more enlightenment.
But this model challenges that.
Directly. Evolution here isn't just biology over time. Consciousness itself. It's seen as eternal, unchanging in its essence.
So the local consciousness can learn. Its awareness can grow within a life.
Yes, the LC's awareness can definitely change, evolve in that sense, but its fundamental nature, its core consciousness, doesn't change just because a civilization is ancient.
So you could have a million-year-old alien species still mostly stuck in embodiment mind.
Theoretically, yes. And humans, who are also in embodiment mind, would be really vulnerable to lies based on that older is better assumption.
They could be easily manipulated by claims of ancient wisdom or benevolence.
It paints a pretty cautious picture for contact, doesn't it?
It really does. So why would any aliens, especially living soul ones, even bother contacting us, given all this?
Well, the source suggests they'd be extremely careful, very trepidatious.
Why specifically?
Our apparent dominance of embodiment mind, for one. Our history of shooting at things we don't understand.
Our track record isn't great.
And even just our media broadcasts. The themes, the conflicts. It probably doesn't paint a flattering picture.
So our cosmic curb appeal is low. And our religions, they probably don't help.
No, quite the opposite, likely.
Yeah.
To a living, soul-aware alien, our religions and all the arguments around them would probably just look like more evidence of embodiment mind delusions. Deeply held, maybe, but still delusions from their perspective.
Even if religion sometimes helps people awaken eventually.
They might see it as a potential tool, maybe across lifetimes, a vehicle for liberation of view, but it's a vehicle you eventually leave behind when you realize your true nature as a living soul.
So seeing a society deeply invested in religious dogma.
Especially ritual-heavy dogmatic religions. That's flagged as a strong sign of embodiment mind. Maybe even mind control, maintaining that limited view.
Not necessarily a sign of spiritual advancement from that perspective.
Not in the way they might see it, no.
Okay. This is all building towards a pretty significant, maybe shocking prediction about future contact.
It is. The sources suggest the big surprise might not be that they contact us, but how.
Or if they contact us officially.
Right. The prediction is that living soul-aware aliens might actively avoid official contact, avoid negotiations.
Especially if certain groups are prominent in government?
Yes, specifically mentioning individuals from Jewish, Christian, and Muslim backgrounds holding power, suggesting their worldview might be seen as a major obstacle by these hypothetical living soul aliens.
Wow. That's a lot to take in, a really provocative idea.
It certainly makes you think differently about potential first contact scenarios.
Okay, let's try to summarize this deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground exploring these living souls like the ELohim ideas.
The absolute core takeaway is that distinction, isn't it?
Between identifying completely with your physical body and senses the embodiment mind.
And recognizing yourself as something deeper, eternal, the living soul, connected to everything.
And understanding which mode you or others or maybe even aliens are operating from, it changes everything.
It changes how you see reality, how you interpret actions, how you'd interact.
It really forces you to look inward, to ask, how much am I operating from that limited physical perspective?
Do I have moments or a deeper sense of being something more enduring?
Yeah. Which brings us to a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on.
Consider your own awareness. How much is driven by the day-to-day, the physical world, the embodiment mind?
And how much comes from or senses a connection to something larger, something timeless?
And how might shifting that perspective, even slightly, change how you view the world, how you view yourself?
And how you might think about the possibility of contact with intelligence that could be operating from a completely, radically different understanding of what it means to be alive.
Something to ponder.